to do with Suketu Mehta's book, This Land is Our Land, An Immigrant's Manifesto. Just a couple of housekeeping messages that we have. The book festival is free, but donations are essential to the festival's success. And you can either outright donate, or we have survival kits and other swag over at the information desk where you can purchase items for sale. Please be as generous as possible. Food is available for sale as well from the Orange Peel Bakery, Mary's Lemonade, the Scottish Bakehouse, Chef Dion Catering, and Chef Amy Johnson's food truck. Please also support those vendors. Authors will take questions from the audience at the end of the discussion, and please, when asking a question, line up at the microphone, which will be set up over there, and keep your questions short so we can get as many in as possible and that the author has time to answer them. And also there will be a book signing in the book signing tent over there. Books can be purchased at the Bunch of Grapes tent over there. Okay. So I'd like to introduce Indira Ganesan, who is the author of 3 novels, The Journey, Inheritance, and As Sweet as Honey. She's a radio DJ on WOMR FM and teaches at Emerson College. She was born in India. I'm sorry, I didn't want to. And moved to the United States as a child. Please help me welcome Indira Ganesan.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming. I was so excited to know that Suketu Mehta was speaking at the festival, and I want to thank Sue Ellen Lazarus for inviting me to introduce him. And I only wish I had been here yesterday, but I wasn't. I actually immigrated to the States in 1965, and I am still astonished and awed to find Indians and other South Asians in the public eye. And that sounds naive, but I think it speaks to the terrible oppression immigrants face within and without, no matter how long we have lived here or hold, have held American citizenship. Suketu Mehta's latest book, This Land is Our Land, has been described by J.R. Ramakrishnan in an interview published in Electric Lit as the manifesto we need when immigration is being criminalized, and it has become a crime. In a recent editorial for the Washington Post, Suketu says, "I will never let anyone, least of all a racist, failed businessman and television huckster's son of a slumlord from Queens and an immigrant from Scotland, define my Americanness. I am an American, Kolkata born. I will call my adopted country loudly with all my strength to account, as in my last book I called India to account for its shabby neglect of its cities and rampant political violence." Those are words I wish I had written, quite frankly. That last book on India, Maximum City, Bombay, Lost and Found, won the Kiriyama Prize for Pacific Rim and South Asian Literature, India's Hutch Crossword Book Award, and was a finalist for the 2005 Pulitzer Award. The Lettre de Ulysses Prize, the BBC4 Samuel Johnson Prize, and the Guardian First Book Award. He has won the Whiting Writers Award, the O. Henry Prize, and the New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship for his fiction. Suketu is an associate professor of journalism at New York University and is a recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship. He is a writer who has the courage to write not only what he thinks, but to do so with an intelligence and wit, and has done the work to back it up. Please join me in welcoming Suketu Mehta.
Okay. Thank you, Indira, for that wonderful introduction, and such an honor to share a stage with you. We just missed each other at the Iowa Writers Workshop in the mid 1980s when most Indians were expected to be engineers or doctors, and there we were writers. And when I first heard about you and read some of your work in Iowa, I was so thrilled that there was someone else who was Indian American who also wanted to be a writer. So finally we meet. But thank you all for coming. It's a really tense morning in the country today. There's massacres in El Paso, in Dayton, in Gilroy, California, all within the space of a week. Last night I read the manifesto that the El Paso shooter put out, this creed of hatred against immigrants. He went into a Walmart in El Paso and murdered 20 people and counting because he had this fear of being replaced by them. So I'd like to open this session with a quote from the great James Baldwin. Says, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. What do you have left when you're drained of the hatred? What's the source of that hatred? It's pain. And the country, the world is filled with hate and pain. And that's why I wrote this book. I'm an immigrant. I came to Jackson Heights in Queens when I was 14 from Bombay. And when I came, New York was this really turbulent place. I got mugged twice in the streets of Queens. Once while I was carrying a paper about Mahatma Gandhi and the concept of nonviolence. I grew up in New York. I went to a ridiculously racist Catholic high school, an all-boys school in which I was the first minority. I was meat thrown to the lions. I survived that, and I went to NYU and the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, and I've lived in Queens, in Brooklyn, and now I live in Manhattan. I've also lived in London, in Brazil, in Paris. And for the first time since I came to the country, I'm seeing this incredible wave of hatred against immigrants. And it starts with, the op-ed columns in the mainstream media, and then it spreads to these people who read these tracts and walk into a Walmart and buy a gun with the same kind of documents that you need to buy a fishing license and act on it. So in my book, I look at migration worldwide, why people are on the move, why they're feared, and why they should be welcomed. Today, there are 250 million people who live in a country other than the one they were born in, and I'm one of them, and Indira is one of them. But a few here might be one of them, or you might be children of immigrants. People are on the move like never before. And the debate in the rich countries is basically about, should we let in immigrants or not? How many should we let in? Should they be skilled or unskilled? What can they do for us? So in my book, what I'm asking is, why are they moving in the first place? It's not because they hate their homes or their families, their native trees, their gods, their language, their foods. They're moving because the rich countries have stolen the future of the poor countries through colonialism, through war, through inequality and corporate colonialism, and through climate change. So my book opens with an anecdote my grandfather once told me. My grandfather was born in India in the 1920s, and then he moved to colonial Kenya to work as a traveling salesman. And then he lived there all his life and then retired in England, where his son was living. So my grandfather sitting in a park in North London one day, minding his own business, And this elderly British gent comes up to him and says, "Why are you here? Why don't you go back to where you come from?" Anticipating the words of her great president by a couple of decades. And my grandfather says, "Well, why am I here? Because you came to my country," he says to the Englishman. "You took all my gold and my diamonds. And so now we have come here to collect. We are the creditors," he says. "We are here because you were there." So that, it seems to me, is an apt description of why people are coming to places like the United States or Europe. And so I began this, I had this idea of that there was this staggering hypocrisy, but I needed to back it up. So I started traveling. I went to Hungary, I went to Morocco, Spain, Mexico, the uh, San Diego, Tijuana border, India, and I started looking at migration. And then I started, gathering some numbers, which are just stunning. Colonialism is often um, presented as a civilizing mission. The colonial countries, Britain, France, Portugal, went out and saved souls, gave us the language, the railways. When the British arrived in India at the beginning of the 18th century, India's share of world GDP was 23%, so basically a quarter of everything made in the world was made in India. By the time the British left, a couple hundred years later, in 1947, India's share of world GDP was under 4%. So the British took what they wanted. They prevented our industries from being built. And then they left. They left making these lousy maps. So they brought down a barrister named Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who'd never been to India, and gave him 6 weeks to draw 2 lines down a map, separating what are now India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, basically home to almost 2 billion people. And these maps were terrible. The civil war broke out. A couple million people died. It was the greatest mass migration in history, the partition. And it's because people didn't know which side of these lines they were going to be. During the colonial period, the European share of world GDP overall went from 20% to 60%. The second thing I look at is, when the colonial countries left, they didn't quite leave. They left behind their corporations. And the corporations, ravaged these countries. If you go to any small African country, and you go to the local Hilton or the Sheraton, you'll notice a group of white men huddle with a group of African men in suits, deciding how to divide the spoils of these countries that they rule. So when they left behind these corporations who exploited the minerals and the resources of these countries and basically made them unlivable. And what they also did is, they took the money, they siphoned these monies out of these countries and put them in tax havens. Every year, $150 billion leaves Africa for these tax havens. So it's not benefiting the countries that it comes from. Developing countries lose 3 times as much to tax havens as all the foreign aid that they receive. I met a little Guinean family in Tangier, in Morocco. So there was a mother, a father, and a newborn baby. And they were about to cross the Mediterranean to get to Spain in a little plastic dinghy, the kind that you kids use on the beach. And I was scared for them. They were going to drug the newborn so that the newborn would stay quiet during the journey. And I said, "Please don't do this." He said, "We've got no choice. We can't live in Guinea." So the country of Guinea in West Africa has up to half of the world's bauxite. And bauxite is a very valuable mineral. We don't know it, but it's in lots of things that we use. There's an American hedge fund called Ox-Zif, which basically owns Guinea. They control most of the bauxite in Guinea. Ox-Zif bribed Guinean officials tens of millions of dollars. The SEC and the Justice Department found out about this, and so they had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in fines for corrupt practices And the fines went not to Guinea, but to the Justice Department. The head of Ockzif, a man named Dan Ock, he bought an apartment recently at 220 Central Park South, where the apartments go for $250 million. But he didn't move out of his last house, which was another penthouse at 15 Central Park West, which only cost $100 million. When you own Guinea, you can buy as many apartments as you want overlooking Central Park. The third thing is guns. All these Central Americans who are coming here, why are they coming? Because we destroyed their countries. 75% of all the guns in Mexico come from the United States. During the Nicaraguan conflict, we flooded Honduras with guns to arm the Contras. We put 1.8 million guns in the country of Honduras. Then we opened up our prisons and we exported these gangs of Latinos like MS-13, which was born not in El Salvador, but in the prisons of Los Angeles, of California. And we unloaded them on these countries which had no capacity to take them in. So these gun massacres that are happening, they're not just happening in our country, we're exporting them. The homicide rates in the countries of the Northern Triangle, in El Salvador, in Guatemala, in Honduras, are higher than in the Middle East. There's a civil war going on. I was in a women's shelter in Tijuana speaking to this Honduran mother who had another just beautiful 18-month-old boy was playing on her lap. And she had run away from San Pedro Sula in Honduras because the gangs had come for her. Her husband was a bystander at a gang massacre and had to run for his life. And then the gangs came for her saying, "Where's your husband? If we don't find him, we'll take your child." So there she was in this woman's shelter, and she was going to claim asylum, which she had a legitimate claim to, because we, the United States, have signed international covenants for asylum, saying anyone who has a well-founded fear of persecution has a right to asylum in our country. She has a legal right to come here. So, and I said to her, you can claim asylum, but they're going to take your baby away from you. This was at the height of the family separation crisis, where we took babies, screaming infants, from their mother's arms and put them in cages thousands of miles away. And she said, "I know this," and tears started rolling down her eyes. She said, "I know this. I know they'll take my baby away. But this is what a mother's love is. I would rather that my child be taken away from me and I never see him again, but I know he's alive somewhere. And someday I have a chance of seeing him. Then know for sure that I have to put him in a box 6 feet below the ground where I come from." These are the choices they're faced with. The fourth factor driving migration is climate change. You think 4 million Syrians looking for political asylum in Germany right now are a problem? What happens when Bangladesh gets flooded and 40 million or 400 million Bangladeshis have to find dry land? By the middle of the century, land that is home to 1.5 billion people today will be desert. Land that is home to 650 million people in 30 years will be underwater. Where are these people going to go? And who caused the crisis? We, the United States, put 1/3 of the excess carbon in the atmosphere. The EU, another quarter. We caused this problem. The Pentagon alone emits more greenhouse gases than 140 countries. The average American uses as much energy as 35 Indians or 185 Ethiopians. And we were the only country to have walked out of the Paris Accords. They are coming here because we were there and continue to stay there. So, I wrote this book, and the more I writing it, the angrier I became just about the hypocrisy of the whole global debate on immigrants. And the terminology used to describe them, these mothers coming with their babies, they're not robbers or rapists or criminals. They're coming here because they have no choice, and they're ordinary heroes. They're doing the same thing that you and I would if we had a child and were faced with this dilemma. We would pick the child up and run to save the child's life, and we would endure anything, anything. 80% of the Central American women who come to the US get raped en route. And the rape is so prevalent that they carry contraceptives before they leave. Who would make this kind of choice? Only someone with no choice. So I'll stop here. It's an angry book, but it's got a happy ending, and I'll get to that later.
We're going to take questions from the audience, and I can hand over the mic to whoever wants to ask. This is, and I am eager. Oh, we got it there. Okay, new to this, but does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So, 2 billion people by the million of the middle of the century are going to be displaced. How is that ever going to be dealt with? How are our children and grandchildren going to deal with that? Are there any ideas whatsoever that can deal with something on that scale?
It's a very good question. Where are they going to go? And, you know, are they all coming to a theater near you? There is actually an effort by the UN. It's called the Global Compact for Migration. Uh, all the usual suspects, the United States, are not signing on. It's an effort to share the responsibility. That is, all these people are going to move. And you know, the thing about immigration is that most migrants, when they move, they don't move from a poor country to a rich country. They move from a poor country to a slightly less poor country. 85% of migrants move from a place like Syria, not to Dearborn, Michigan, but to Jordan, to Lebanon, to Turkey. And you know, Lebanon, for example, like 1/3 of the country now is recent immigrants. They've been incredibly, they've taken on much more than their fair share of the burden. So there needs to be a global response to the coming mass migration. Um, and there isn't now. So what we're going to see really is, you know, these walls, these fences being erected. Israel's borders are heavily walled and fenced, and not just against Palestinians, also against Africans trying to come into the country. I went to Hungary, the Serbian-Hungarian border, where there's another giant wall with watchtowers and guard dogs and helicopters and drones. It's like something out of the 1930s. Um, you know, we've got this wall that Trump wants to build. Um, but it doesn't matter how many walls or fences we build, because when people are desperate enough, they'll find a way. So, for example, um, uh, there's a border between the Scandinavian countries, Norway and Russia, and there were these rules that you couldn't drive over the border or you couldn't walk over. The Norwegians wouldn't let you in if you walked or drove. So all these Middle Easterners started going to Russia, making their way through Europe into Russia to this border, where there was these guys renting bicycles. So as long as they went on a bicycle across the border, that didn't technically violate the rules. So then you had tens of thousands of Syrians bicycling across the border before the Norwegians quickly changed their rules. So on bicycles or on foot or on boats, people are going to keep coming. And really, it's got to be done at the UN right now is the only international body we have that can orchestrate some kind of policy of who gets what share of these people who basically, unless we're willing to watch images of millions of people going underwater or starving to death.
I'm just wondering about the state of Mumbai now. I read your fabulous book, Maximum City, and I remember that when I don't know how many years ago it was written, but it was pretty dire then, the situation with the real estate. But now with the heat wave, I mean, is it livable? And are many people fleeing Mumbai, and where are they going? And what about you? Why did you leave India?
Yeah. So Mumbai is, or Bombay as I like to call it,
Bombay, yeah,
um,
yeah.
um, it's hot, but it's not as hot as Delhi. So temperatures in northern India this year were 123 degrees. Um, Tens of thousands of people basically roasted to death. And this is nothing. By uh, towards the middle of the century, parts of northern India will literally be unlivable. That is, if you walk outside, because of this combination of body temperature and humidity, you literally will not be able to last more than an hour or two before you just die. And that's true of Bangladesh as well. Um, so turning to the thing about Bombay is that it's cooled by sea breezes, so it's still not as extreme as northern India. But even this year, there were massive floods. See, India depends on the monsoon for every, um, you know, around now. Um, Much of India is nourished by the monsoons that come in from the sea. Just like the jet stream, the monsoons are being disrupted by climate induced phenomena like El Nino. And every year, the rain is more intense and the heat is more intense. So people have a choice of dying by flood or by fire. Um, and yeah, there's, you know, people in India are also asking, like, who's really responsible for this? Today, the United States is not the world's biggest carbon emitter. It's China has taken that place. But China is doing much more about its emissions than the US is.
And why did you leave India?
So I left at 14 with
Oh, okay,
my
14.
family, and then I went back 21 years later to write this book about Bombay, and then I came back because I wanted to write a book about New York, and that's what I'm doing now.
So, at present, one of the only solutions, and it's been a solution for the past 40, 50 years, for many people, a permanent solution, are the refugee camps that we don't talk about in this conversation. And when we're asked the question, where will the people from Bangladesh go? Given current policies, they will go to refugee camps. And we, the richer world, will pay places like Turkey or elsewhere, Jordan, as we do now. Is there any thought about how to make those places more livable, more humane, more governable than we all know that they currently are not?
So some of the world's largest cities today are these refugee camps, like Dadaab in Kenya, which have millions of Somalis. And however nice you make it, it's still a tent city. It's like these Palestinian refugee camps that are all over the Middle East. They're horrible, unlivable places, and we've condemned generations of people to live in this. This can't hold. They're supposed to be temporary places, not permanent places. Um, and that's the solution that the rich countries think will save them from having to pay their debts. So my book calls for immigration as reparations. Um, I think it's not only morally just to pay the bill that the West has run up by letting in people from these countries, but it's also a matter of it makes economic sense. So here I'll get into the happy ending of my book, which is when people move, it's great for everyone. It's great for the countries that they come to, because the rich countries aren't making enough babies. And here, again, I want to read out some statistics. So without immigration, America's economic growth would have been 15% lower from 1990 to 2014. Britain's would have been 20% lower, and Southern Europe's up to 30% lower. If we were to triple our immigration intake, today we have 1 million uh, green cards that we give out every year. If that were to be increased to 3 million, our GDP would rise by 2.6%. And our economy would gain $15.5 trillion over the next 14 years. If we were to deport all 12 million undocumented, the economy would lose 8 trillion. If we were to legalize all the undocumented, the economy would gain another 2 trillion. So it just totally makes economic sense. Immigrants are 14% of the American population, but we started a quarter of all the new businesses. And since 2000, immigrants have earned over a third of all the American Nobel Prizes given out in science. We do not come empty-handed, mine host. um, it's the same thing with Social Security. Half of all Americans are over 40, and the US could become a nation of geezers as the baby boomers retires. From now to 2065, immigrants and our children make up 88% of the country's population growth. So Social Security, there's a massive crisis going on. For the first time, Social Security is actually dipping into its savings fund to pay out benefits. In 2018, the US fertility rate fell for the 4th straight year to 1.7 babies per woman. The replacement rate is 2.1 babies per woman. So the Social Security fund is basically being depleted. And the way that you replenish it is by letting in immigrants, because immigrants pay more in Social Security than they get in benefits. Even the undocumented. Over the let's see, undocumented immigrants pay into the system but are ineligible for most benefits, right? So the undocumented, the people that, everyone who says, come here legally. In 2010, they paid $13 billion in Social Security payroll taxes, and they got only $1 billion back in benefits. So the US made out, 12 billion in the black. So the immigrant armada that is coming to our shores is actually a rescue fleet. And the movement of immigrants is also good for the migrants themselves, because for many of them, like these little families that I met, it's literally a matter of life and death. They also increase their standard of living, and it's great for the countries that they move from, because if you really want to help the global poor, then let them come and let them send back money. Because remittances, that the money that these people send back in $100, $200, $300 increments, these gardeners, these maids, they're ordinary heroes. Most of their savings that they have is sent back. Last year, migrants sent back $689 billion in remittances, which amounts to 4 times more than all the foreign aid in the world, and 100 times more than all the debt relief that we've given to poor countries in the world. So it's the best and most targeted way of helping the global poor. Immigration overall is really a win-win story. And we think, America, let them come slowly. When people came before, they didn't come in such huge waves. That's hogwash. During the age of mass migration, from the late 19th century to around the early 20th century, 1/4 of Europe got up and moved to the United States, including the president's ancestors. And what happened? The US replaced Europe at the pinnacle of world wealth and power. We think the country is full up. We can't have any more people. In terms of density, we rank 190th in the world. We have all these cities. We've got all this space. And if you go to, so I'll tell you one story, because sometimes the arguments get lost in a fog of numbers. But if you go to Schenectady in upstate New York, Schenectady was this depressed industrial town. It was the home of GE. GE left, it laid off all these people, the factories closed. There were these Poles, Germans, Irish, who had no jobs, nothing to do. So one day, the Republican mayor of Schenectady, a man named Al Jurzinski, was walking around, and he saw a man, brown-skinned man, building a Hindu temple. And he says, you may ask what you're doing, where you're from. He says, well, I'm originally from Guyana. Guyana is a West Indian country where there's a lot of Hindus. And he says, I'm building a temple. And the mayor said, that's great. Can we help? Do you need any public assistance? And the man says, oh, we don't believe in public assistance. And the Republican mayor said, you're singing my tune. Where can we get more of you? So he says, you should go to Richmond Hill in Queens and, you can pick up a few more Guyanese. So the mayor started going to Richmond Hill and addressing community meetings, saying, "Oh, ye Guyanese, move to Schenectady. We'll give you cheap mortgages. We'll, help you settle in." And he started personally driving them around in a bus, taking these groups of immigrant Guyanese, showing them his city, taking them to his mother-in-law's house for homemade Polish wine. In spite of that, they came. There's now 10,000 Guyanese living in Schenectady. There's downtown is flourishing. There's a cricket league. There's a Guyanese day. There's Guyanese people on the city council. The same thing in Hamtramck, Michigan, in Utica, in all these towns in upstate New York, in Maine, in Minnesota, which are being revitalized by immigrants. What we need is warm bodies for cold cities, and immigrants can do it.
I have a lot in common with you. I come from a city that has been a recent target of President Trump, Baltimore. And I am now a resident of Chilmark, Massachusetts. So I feel that I've been freed from oppression in a way. But 3 years ago, Sharon Stone was on Martha's Vineyard to receive a philanthropy award for her international activities. And she brought an entourage with her, and one of the people in the entourage I happened to meet, and he had a similar interest in maritime issues as my family had had, because my family had been involved in the purchase of an old Bay Line steamer that went from Baltimore to Norfolk, and our community purchased in 1946, 1947, that became the ship the Exodus. And we have created the Exodus Institute to deal with forced migration and refugees. And we are trying to raise public awareness nationally, primarily. We have a Washington office now where we talk to our senators and congressmen. And we've just had a symposium at the Film Center in Martha's Vineyard called Pursuing the Dream. And the last film that was shown was The River and the Wall, which had to do with the Rio Grande River between Mexico and the United States, and the beauty of it, and what's going to happen if the wall is built, and actually the folly and the impossibility of building that wall, which we're going to try to show in Washington in a short period of time. So how would you recommend our going forward and raising public awareness?
Right. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. That's really excellent work. By Exodus, I imagine you referring to the ship of Jews fleeing the Holocaust. And so, Jewish American organizations are among the leaders in fighting Trump's immigration policies, because they know very personally what it means to have to flee for your lives and be turned away from country after country. The United States had shameful policies towards Jews fleeing the Holocaust. And now the same policies are being replicated against Central Americans and other people coming to our shores. And it's really just mind-boggling that the architect of these policies is a man named Stephen Miller, who grew up in a Jewish household, and he's the leading immigrant hater in the administration. His own uncle wrote a screed against him in Facebook, saying basically, we reject this man from this family. This man does not represent Judaism or our family. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to draw attention to the present emergency. The people who've come here before, often there is this tendency in American life that last one in, shut the door. So there's all these Irish and Italians, who are now getting up and saying, well, we came here legally, and our forefathers came to Ellis Island. Well, there weren't any laws then. Anyone could just get up and come to the US, whoever wanted, except if you were Chinese, because there was an Alien Exclusion Act in the early 20th century. And there were, the same waves of hatred that are now being directed against Latinos were directed against Irish American and Jews. There was a political party called the Know Nothing Party in the 19th century, which was specifically directed against Catholics. And they elected all these representatives they almost had a preferential a person in the White House. Um, so, and it goes back even deeper, right? We think right now um, there's all these arguments being made by people like Amy Wax and Amy Chua, the Tiger Mom, saying that American culture assimilates some people more than others. It's either Judeo-Christians, or we need skilled immigrants, or we need this or that group more than that other group. Benjamin Franklin, in the 1700s, started railing against a group of people who he said, these people don't speak our language, they don't follow our customs, they, these Palatine Boers should not be let into the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You know who he was speaking about? Germans, the ancestors of our current president. Ben Franklin thought the Germans would never assimilate into Pennsylvania. So this is an old story in American life. Who gets in, who gets to shut the door, who gets to claim that they're an authentic American. I have an op-ed in this morning's Washington Post, which I would recommend to you. And the title is, I'm an uppity immigrant. Don't expect me to be grateful to be here. And then later in the op-ed, I say, I'm not just grateful, I'm head over heels in love with America. And this idea of America, that this is a country which is made up of all the other countries. This is the American exceptionalism. And this is what I will fight with all my life to defend.
Good for you. Thank you so much for doing that.
Okay, it's one sentence question. Do you believe in colonial reparations?
I absolutely believe in colonial reparations, and I have another op-ed in the New York Times asking for immigration as reparations. And I said, well, if we are to have immigration quotas, then each quota should have each country should have a quota for people of countries that they've despoiled. So, for example, the British should have quotas for Indians and Nigerians, the United States for Central Americans and Filipinos, the Belgians for very large numbers of Congolese. So yes, short answer, yes.
You mentioned something just there which struck me, and I wanted to ask you. I think the big difference between the last century's immigration and ours is whoever came last time came. Now we're cherry picking, and that may be good and bad. I'm looking at my doctors: Dr. Chang, Dr. Mukpana, Dr. Makija, Dr. Czar, Dr. Gopal. I wouldn't get medical care if your peoples hadn't come. But on the other hand, what's happening back home if we're only taking those people? Or if I work with a lot of North African countries of college students, they're all taking technical courses, they're all taking business courses, and I suspect they're all coming here and they're not going to fix their own countries. And things are just going to get worse if we don't. I think we have to have tier quotas. For all the doctors we accept, we have to accept 5 times as many laborers.
So, you're referring to the brain drain, and you're absolutely right that we should. A country doesn't just function on doctors. It also needs laborers, and it needs many more laborers because the doctors, in order to do their doctoring, they need people at home who'll do the things that they can't. They need food grown. They need things transported to them. This brain drain theory is interesting. It's on one hand, it kind of, you think all these people are coming here, it means they were educated at the greatest expense of their struggling states, and now we're just reaping off the benefits by taking their best and the brightest. Well, it's not that simple, because many of the best and the brightest, once they come here, they also go back and they feed other hospitals, companies in their countries. And they send money back. They get technical knowledge here, and today's migration is much more fluid. I know many people, Indians, for example, who live both in India and here. They might work in a hospital here, but then they'll go back for a month and then volunteer to put up a hospital in their village or their region. They will help with technical expertise, they'll help with money, they'll help with knowledge transfer. So basically, I've looked at lots of studies about this brain drain theory, and by now it's really not quite valid because of the increasing ease with which immigrants move back and forth. I mean, what is exile when a round trip home is $500 or $1,000, right? Today's immigrants move back and forth much more rapidly than they used to, and it's a good thing for the world.
Thank you so much for your questions, and I think this is a great book to read, so I urge you. Thank you, and go buy the book and read it. It's fabulous. Thank you.